He says, in New York, you might get mugged or, they'll say F you or, whatever. But in Los Angeles, it's kind of like they want to sacrifice you. Why are the big realms of good and evil, and they exist. They're as real as we are. Why are these realms slugging it out for the souls, the hearts and souls of mankind? You're presented with a lot of things and a lot of new games to play and a lot of people and money, and there's a lot of weird power games, and there's the studios over in California. I think society is kind of devolving somehow.
There's a reason certain names become radioactive in Hollywood. Not because those people did something unforgivable, but because they saw something, and they refused to pretend they didn't. Mel Gibson is one of those names. You know the movies: Mad Max, Braveheart, Lethal Weapon, The Passion of the Christ. Credited in over 70 acting roles, more than 20 producer roles, 12 films directed. By any measure, one of the most powerful filmmakers Hollywood has ever produced. But here's what the industry would rather you forget. Mel Gibson has been sounding the alarm on what really goes on inside that machine for decades. Long before it was trending, long before anyone was listening. And in this video, we're going to let him speak for himself. Because once you hear what he actually said, and when he said it, it hits very differently. Let's get into it. Here's what makes Mel's story so compelling. The warnings came before he even got to Hollywood. Before the fame, before the money, before any of it. He tells this story on the Joe Rogan podcast, and I want you to really listen to it.
He says, in New York, you might get mugged or, they'll say F you or, whatever. But in Los Angeles, it's kind of like they want to sacrifice you.
Now, that wasn't Mel's own words originally. He's quoting another actor who said it to him before he ever moved to LA. And his reaction at the time? Shock, confusion. He laughed it off. But then he went. And then he found out. When Mel arrived in Hollywood as a young man in his mid-20s, he tells Rogan he immediately started picking up on things he couldn't explain. And nobody was going to explain them to him either.
When I came over here, I was in my mid-20s.
Right.
The first time I really came over here. I had a whole bunch of weird paranoid suspicions about what the hell was going on because there was a lot of stuff I couldn't understand.
Right.
And nobody was really bothering to explain it to me.
They don't.
And I formed a bunch of opinions about the town.
If it's not clear here, he's talking about LA, Hollywood.
And about the people in it that were like, surely that couldn't be, because a whole place can't be like, Weird Town, where the stranger wanders in and all the people are in the bar and they all shut up when he looks at them and they tell you don't go into the house on the hill, and it's like that. And then you go away and you think, no, I was wrong. I mean, that's insane thinking. I'm paranoid. I imagined that stuff. That couldn't be the reason for why so-and-so was acting like, could it? And then you find out later on the track that you were exactly on track with a lot of this stuff. Not specifically on track, but that you could, that some of your worst nightmares were real at the time, and you think,
He describes LA like a horror movie town, where the stranger walks into a bar, everyone goes quiet, and someone whispers, "Don't go into the house on the hill." And then, here's what really stopped me. He says he eventually talked himself out of his suspicions, told himself he was being paranoid, that it was all in his head, that nothing that dark could really be going on. What Mel describes next is something I think every young person needs to hear, whether they're going into entertainment or not. Because this isn't just about Hollywood. This is about what powerful systems do to people who enter them unprepared.
A couple of years off, which I guess, was that because you didn't want to burn out, or was it because you had something that you wanted to do for a couple of years?
Yeah, well, you get to the place, you're in your 20s, and you're presented with a lot of things and a lot of new games to play and a lot of people and money, and there's a lot of weird power games, and there's the studios over in California and all this kind of stuff, and it gets to be a little bit overwhelming while you try and figure out, firstly, who you are, because, in your 20s, you don't really have a sense of yourself yet. And then try and figure out what the game is. So I felt I needed to take a breather because I was a little overwhelmed by the whole thing. This tide was carrying me, and I wasn't in control of it. It was controlling me. So I just stopped. I bought a farm, and I grew organic vegetables, and I raised cattle, and I milked a cow, and the whole thing, you know. And that lasted about 1.5 years, and I thought, this is not a great business, and it's breaking my back.
And what does he say happened to him? The tide was carrying him. He wasn't in control. The machine was running him, not the other way around. So what did he do? He stopped, walked away, bought a farm, grew vegetables, raised cattle, unplugged completely for 1.5 years just to remember who he was. That, right there, is a man with enough spiritual awareness to know when something is pulling him in the wrong direction, and the discernment to walk away from it, even at the height of his career. Now here is where Mel stops being vague and gets theological. Because he doesn't just describe Hollywood as corrupt, he describes it as a spiritual battleground. And he does it in plain terms that I think are worth sitting with.
Of good and evil, and they exist. They're as real as we are. Why are these realms slugging it out for the souls, the hearts and souls of mankind? Why are we the meat in that sandwich? Little old us. Flawed us, imperfect us. Why? Why is that about us? And I'm trying to answer that question. I don't know if I can. I've attempted, and maybe with God's help and with image and with sound and music, we can deliver on some answers to some of those massive questions, these existential questions.
There it is. Mel Gibson, one of the most celebrated filmmakers of his generation, describing the entertainment industry through the lens of a spiritual war. Not metaphorically, literally. And he says he genuinely doesn't know if he can fully answer that question, but he's trying to. With every film he makes, with every truth he tells, he's trying. Now let's be real. Mel Gibson is not a man who walked through Hollywood unscathed. He has very publicly stumbled. There are things on his record that he himself has never tried to excuse. But listen to how he talks about that on the Joe Rogan podcast, because this might be the most important part of everything he says.
I don't think it's any secret. I am flawed in the fact that I am by nature born an alcoholic, right? I did drugs, I did alcohol, and there was nothing that could stop me from doing that. Nothing. So I was really kind of you're on a downhill run. So I regard the fact that I was able to appeal to something greater than myself to help me and actually stop me doing that. I think that's a miracle. It is. For me, it is. And for many.
And then he says something even more profound. He says, "The beauty of believing is that even for your transgressions, you can be forgiven. You can be redeemed." That's the gospel. Right there. From a man who has been crucified in the public square and came back anyway. And maybe nothing tells the full story of Mel Gibson versus Hollywood better than what happened when he made The Passion of the Christ.
The Passion of the Christ.
It seemed like there was resistance to that movie.
Oh yeah, no, there was...
which I thought was very strange. There was like Hollywood resistance to that movie. Like people didn't like that you were making it, it seemed like.
Yeah, there was a lot of opposition to it. And I don't know. I think if you ever hit on that subject matter, you're going to get people going, because
of course
it's big subject matter, and it's like and my contention is, when I was making it, it was like, you're making this film, and the idea was that we're all responsible for this, that his sacrifice was for all mankind, and that for all our ills and all the things in our fallen nature, it was a redemption. So, and I believe that. I actually am, I was born into a Catholic family. I'm very Christian in my beliefs, So I do actually believe this stuff to the full. So depicting that was an honor, but it was also, you got the daylights beat out of you for it.
Yeah, because there's resistance, first of all, from secular Hollywood, where for whatever reason, Christianity is the one religion that you're allowed to disparage.
Yeah.
Christianity is the one religion where people all these progressive, open-minded, leftist people, they'll embrace all these different religions until it comes to Christianity. And for whatever reason, that represents like white male, you know, whatever it represents, colonialism, you know, whatever it represents, it's negative.
Yeah, sure, it's gotten a bad rap. And people do feel free to beat up on it. Well, I regard the Gospels as history. It's verifiable history. Some people say, "Oh, it's a fairy tale. He never existed," but he did. And there are other accounts, verifiable historical accounts outside the biblical ones that also bear this up. That yes, he did exist. And the other aspect of that is that all the evangelists, the apostles who went out there. Every single one of those guys died rather than deny their belief. And nobody dies for a lie. Nobody.
Right. Yeah. Well, the resurrection is the one that is the most difficult for people to swallow.
Yes.
That's the one that requires the most faith.
The most faith and the most belief. Yeah, resurrection.
Yeah.
Who gets back up 3 days later after he gets murdered in public? Who gets back up under his own power? Buddha didn't do that.
Right.
You know, so.
You believe that was a real event?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What brought you to that belief? Is this something that you've always had, or is it something you studied it and you've come to this conclusion because of the historical accounts? And
yes. I think as a child, you know, one accepts things on faith because, you know, you're raised by people who are nice to you and they believe it. So as a child, you learn these things and you accept them on faith. And I still have that faith, but as I got older, I came to it through intellect and through reading and putting things together in accounts, and then occurrences like in my own life. You know, I mean, I don't think it's any secret. I am flawed in the fact that I am by nature born an alcoholic, right? I did drugs, I did alcohol, so, and there was nothing that could stop me from doing that. Nothing. So I was really kind of you're on a downhill run. So I regard the fact that I was able to appeal to something greater than myself to help me and actually stop me doing that. I think that's a miracle. It is. For me, it is. And for many. And we're allowed to make mistakes. And we do. We are so flawed. And I'm more flawed than anyone, you know. But it's something that I think, and it's pretty safe to say I'm in the third act now. You're in act 2, right? Gesundheit. But I'm in the third act, man. So you have to think about the other side. You have to think about what comes next. Is there a next? Yes, there is. I believe there is. And I think it's depends on how you live now. And the beauty of believing is that even for your transgressions, you can be forgiven and you can be redeemed.
He got, in his words, the daylights beat out of him for it. The studio system pushed back, the press pushed back, and the film still went on to become one of the highest-grossing independent productions in cinema history. Because you can't suppress the truth forever. It finds its audience. It always does. I want to ask you something. If a man who has seen the inside of that machine, who paid a real price for speaking out, who had every reason to just stay quiet and cash checks, if that man keeps telling the same story decade after decade, are you going to dismiss it? Or are you going to listen? Mel Gibson hasn't been perfect. He said so himself. But he has been consistent. And in a town built on illusions, consistency about something this dark takes a particular kind of courage. Or a particular kind of faith. I think it's both. If this video made you think, drop a comment. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because we're just getting started uncovering the people in this industry who chose truth over comfort.